Hello guys, and welcome to today's tutorial. In our tutorial today, we're going to talk about the random color generator, which is what you are seeing right here. So when I click on this generate color button, it generates a color, and we have the preview of the color name, and the hexadecimal value. So you can pick this hexadecimal value and then use wherever you want. And the more you click on the button, it will keep generating different colors for you. So this helps you to learn about names of colors and also have their hexadecimal value to use in your project. So if you are visiting my channel for the first time, do not hesitate to like this video, comment, and subscribe to our channel. So let's get started. We have our file here. This is where we're going to do our working, and I'm going to be making use of an API, the color API, to help us return the name of the color and also to help us return the value, the hexadecimal value. All right, sorry for that. So let's jump right in. I'm going to split this. This is the VS Code. I've set up the HTML and the CSS, and we have our empty script file where we'll be writing our JavaScript. So let me put this side by side this way. All right. So there are three things we need to grab from this HTML: the color box, which is the color preview; the color info, which is underneath between the color preview and the button. Anytime we generate that, color information will be shown below, and we have this generate button with the ID of generate. So we'll start by creating different variables. First is going to be color box, and we'll pass it to document dot get element by ID, and then we'll pass in the ID of that element, which is color box, and we do the same for the second one. The second one is going to be color info, and we'll pass the same to document, pass the same to document dot get element by ID, and the ID of that is color info. Okay, and then the third one here, hold on, by ID. All right, I forgot to add this here. All right, the third one is going to be I'll call this gen btn for generate button, and we'll do some documents. If I'm making these mistakes, I don't know why. All right, documents dot get element by ID, and I pass in the ID of generate. Okay, now we have the three elements from our HTML file. Let's move on. The next thing now, we're going to create our hexadecimal value array. Let me just call this the hex array. Hexadecimal is base 16, and we need 15 digits. So I'm going to call this in a variable called, I'll call it, let me just call it hex digits, and I'll store in an array of the 15 hexadecimal values or digits in it, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'll start from A, B, sorry, has to be B, and all should be in quotes, C, D, E, and have E, and the last one is F. So this is our hexadecimal digits. Why we need this is because we are going to use our loop to loop through these digits. We loop through them so that we're able to return a random hexadecimal values from them. Next, what do I need to create? I need to create a function that will generate the hexadecimal numbers. So I'll call this generate single hex number, hex value. So I'll call this function, I'll call it gen1 color. Okay, and so inside this function, there are a couple of things we're going to do there. First, our hexadecimal value starts with hash symbol, so we need to hard code this inside this function, and then we use our for loop for the other parts of this. So I'm going to call this let's start x. Let's store this to this. Okay, and then right inside here we're going to say for let I equal 0, then I is going to be less than 6, and then we increment the I. Okay, so why am I using less than 6 here? Is because I want this loop to iterate 6 times in order to give us the 6 hexadecimal values like we have it here. So if it iterates more than 6 times, it's going to be more than 6 and it's not going to work. If it's more than 5, less than 6, maybe 5, 4, 3, it's still not going to work. So that's why we need 6. And inside it here, I'm going to use this math. I'm going to use the math function to make sure that we have whole numbers, not decimal numbers or decimal values. And also inside this math flow, I'm going to use math.random to help generate random numbers. Okay, so this random numbers is going to be within the range of hexadecimal values between 0 to 15. It won't be up to 16. Okay, so for that I'm going to pass this into the I'm going to pass this into the math.random. I will now call this array. I'll call this array right here dot length. This will return the number of items we have inside this array. And in doing so, it simply means that the number of items inside this array will be determine the range of values or numbers that this math.random would keep on generating. So I would like to store this in a variable. I'll store this in a variable and I'll call it x random. All right. So at this point, I can log this out to the screen. Let me log this out so that we see how it works. I'll call this function generate color. And right inside here, I'm going to log out the hex random. If I log it out, let's see what we have on the screen. Okay, here I'm going to log it out. Okay, so you can see that we have, if I refresh again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is six different values, but it's between 0 to 15. It can't exceed 15. It can't exceed 15. It can be any value, but it cannot exceed 15. So that's what we have done right here. And if that be the case, the next thing that we need to do now, let me take this off. So what we need to do now is we need to append the numbers that is returned to this. Okay, we now say our start hex should then be like this, like this. We call our array, which is the hex digits, and the index of this array would then be the random number that is generated here, which is called hex random. So if I log out the stats value, so what we have on the screen is this. Okay, so this is already giving us our hexadecimal value because of what we did here, the loop, the math functions, and then we appended all the values returned at each iteration. We added it to this hash symbol and we are storing it here. And that is what we have right here, 6 values plus the hash symbol, which is a complete hexadecimal value. Now let me leave that here. So at the end of the loop, we need to return something. And what we have to return here is the hexadecimal value. And that's all. So this is what we then need to pass onto our API so that we will be able to return the color name and the hexadecimal value onto the screen. What then do I need to do next? Let me take this off and comment this out too. So while working with an API, we need to use an async function and our fetch method. We need to use the fetch to pull out data from our API. So I'm going to create an async arrow function here, and it's not going to take any parameter. So I just leave it like that. And inside this async function, I need to call this function, and I'll store it in a variable. Just call it a color, and that color will just store. And you remember when I call this function, it will just return hexadecimal values, just like we saw on the console earlier on. So we need that inside the async and await function. And the next thing is, remember we're using an API, so I need to slice our value. I'll call final hex, and I'll pass this to our hex color dot slice, and I'm just pulling out just the first value, and let me log out this. When I log out this final hexadecimal value, let me call the function. Okay, sorry, I need to give this async function a name, and I'll call it generate color. Let me take off this. All right, so let's leave it this. Let's convert it. So this is going to be called the generate color, and let me call it right under here, and you see what is happening here. So this slice has taken away this hash symbol from our hexadecimal value. Why? Because of the API that we want to use. Now let's call the API base URL. So we're going to create a variable here which I'm going to call the base URL, and what we want to store inside this base URL is our API base URL. Right here in this color API, we have the base URL here, and we can pass in some parameters into the base URL, which includes either the hexadecimal, RGB, HSL, or other color combinations. So I'm going to grab this base URL, and then I head back to our code where I want to use it. So I'm going to use backtick instead of quotation, and I'll paste this right here. I'll put / and pass ID ? and I'll pass in our hexadecimal value that is already generated here, and this is how you pass it. Pass it like this, open this, and then you pass the final hexadecimal. So this is it, just like that. This is our base URL set up already. I will pass in the hexadecimal values we generated from here right inside our API. So from there we can then access the API. There is a function I need to create right up here, and that function, I need to create an event listener that will make this click button here, that will make this button to generate this code anytime we click on it. So I will get this, and right here, I'll pass event listener to this, and this event is going to listen to clicks, and then we take a callback function, and then this callback function, the only thing we want to pass into this is our generate color function. So anytime that we click on the button, it should call the function for us and that's it. Let's check if it works. I'm going to log this out again, and I will click. Okay, at every click it is logging out our hexadecimal code. That's fine. Okay, what else we need to do here is we now use the try and catch block to grab data or to fetch data from our API. And what we do, we say try and catch. The first thing first, we need to grab data from our API. So the rest should be equal to await and then we use the fetch. Come on, we use the fetch to grab data from the API, and we're passing in the base URL. So if I didn't set up this base URL here, I could just grab this link and pass it directly inside here. So whichever way you do it is going to work. It's not going to give you any issue. And whatever data that is returned from the API, we should convert it into a JSON file. So we say this.json, and that's it. What else we need to do now is from this data fetched from the API, we'll pass it onto the color preview so that at the click of this button, we'll see the preview of the color code that is being generated. That's the next thing that we have to do right now. And we're going to apply color to preview. Remember, the color box here is the preview right here, and I'm going to get that. I've said color box dot, what we want to pass in here is the background color. We want to apply that hexadecimal color to the background, and that will make us to use the style property. And what are we styling? The background color, and we are setting this background color to, we are pulling out whatever we want to pass to the background color from the API. So we're going to grab this hexadecimal value right here. Now this is how we do it. So we now say data, because this data is keeping what we pulled out from our API. Say data.hex.value. Okay, so let's check that out. If I click, now this is an API, which means it's gonna take a little time depending on the network. So if it's working, the color preview should change. Okay, it's still taking time because of the network. That's fine. So this shows our code is working. So whenever I click here, it changes the color of the preview. Okay, that's fine. Let's proceed. I would like to log out this. No, I'll log this one. All right, so you see, because I'm logging out this data, each time I click the button, it returns an object. And when I open it, you see a whole lot of things right there. So, and from that object, we are now pulling out the hexadecimal value that we are passing to the color box, which is our color preview right here. Then let me comment this out. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we now pull out the color name and the value, we pass it underneath this color preview. And to do that, I'm going to grab this color info because that is where we want to pull the color information to. I'll call color info and dot inner HTML because I want to pass some HTML right there. I'll use the backtick and I'll come down here. So here I'm going to use a paragraph element, and inside that paragraph I'm going to use span with a class. This span will have a class name of label. Let me call this label, and the label is going to be, let me just call it color name. All right, and then I'll have to close this span. All right, so when I save, I have to refresh. Or something is wrong. Sorry. Let me restart this server. Okay. So right here we have this span label that I passed in there, and the second span that I'm going to create is going to be, if I click here, just hold on, you see the color name is here. So I want to output the name of the color that is showing on the preview next after that. And for me to do that, I need another span with a class. I've started them already. So the class name here is going to be value, and the value at this point is going to be pulled out from our API as well, and I'm going to call it data dot name dot value. So where am I getting this from? I'm getting this from our API. So if I come down here, I open this. So we have name, objects, and value inside right there. So from there, I'm pulling out the name of the color and I'm passing it onto our page. So I need to close this span. Okay, now let's try again. That's worked fine. Color name, and you can see the name there. Try again and again. That's fine. So I make a copy of this because I need to also pull out the value, the hexadecimal value, and this is color name, and I'm going to call this color code, and I'll just change this name to hex, still from the API, and that's it. So when I click, see, this is the hexadecimal value, this is the name. Try it again, and it's working pretty fine. So that's all we need to do for this try block. And the second one, we are going to grab the error. We're going to catch the error if there is any error, and we can log the error to the screen, to the browser console if we want, and we can put something like okay, failed to fetch color info. Yeah, and what I will do immediately after that is I'll pass in the actual error message right here. But then this will be on the browser console, but on this page I'm going to call this color info once more, and now this time I will access the inner text or the text content as the case may be. So we call the inner text and we pass it to this error loading color data. All right, that's all that we need, and then our color generator web application is ready. If I refresh this, I click, just waiting a minute. This is network. Okay, it's working, it's working, it is working. So if there is any reason why we are unable to pull out this information, or there is network problem, then let me just make a mistake. Okay, let me just make a mistake here, maybe in the base URL, and I click, you see error loading data, color data. That's what we have here. And if I log this, if I open the console.log, you should see failed to fetch color info, and the actual error is type error, failed to fetch. So because this base URL is not correct, okay, I just removed something. But then if I put it back and I save, then I click, okay, no error, everything is working fine. So this is how you can create your color generator app or websites, and it will keep on generating random color with the color name and the hexadecimal value that you can use. If you have learned something in this video, subscribe to my channel, comment, like and share this video, and I see you in the next tutorial.